Karen and the HOA tried to steal my land. Here's what happened next. You've probably heard of the struggles between residents and powerful organizations, but the story we're about to share with you today is not just any ordinary battle. This is a tough and surprising legal battle between a man and the Homeowners Association, HOA, when he discovered that the HOA might have been quietly infringing on his family's property rights in a land development project without any prior notice. David Cooper, an ordinary resident, had spent his whole life defending his family's land. This land was not just a material asset, but a precious inheritance passed down through 3 generations. But when the HOA sent a notice about the rezoning of property boundaries, everything he had once trusted seemed to fall apart. However, David didn't give up. He began the fight not only for his personal interests, but also for the benefit of the entire community. With the help of allies like Martha Williams, an elderly neighbor, and Robert Lee, a surveying expert, David relentlessly fought, gathered evidence, and battled to protect not only his own ownership rights, but also justice for everyone living in this neighborhood. From unexpected discoveries of archaeological signs to uncovering a shady connection between Karen Smith, the HOA president, and real estate developers, this battle became more intense. However, will David be able to win this fight and ensure that the community's rights are protected? Stay tuned until the end of the story to find out the unexpected result that you won't believe. So what do you think about this story? Do you believe the HOA is truly acting for the community's benefit, or is it simply for the personal gain of those in charge? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below the video. We look forward to hearing your feedback and perspectives on this intense battle. Don't forget to watch the entire story, as there are surprising twists you won't want to miss. Let's discover how David won and whether justice was truly served in this case. My name is David Cooper, and I've lived on my family's land for 3 generations. This land has witnessed countless springs and family stories, from my grandfather to my father, and now to me. Every stone, every ancient tree in the garden holds a memory. I'm sure you understand this feeling, when a place is not just a home, but a remnant of history, right? I thought I was lucky to have a family with such a piece of land. But then, one day, an unexpected letter arrived. It wasn't a congratulatory letter, nor was it any cheerful announcement. That letter felt like a slap to my face. After reviewing the community boundaries, it read, "The land behind your house has been reclassified as common land for the development of a resort." I couldn't believe it. I looked at the letter, then looked back at the land before me. How could this be? 3 generations of my family have lived and cared for this land. Over 3 lifetimes, we've planted trees, built, and created memories here. And now, all of it, just because of one signature, one heartless decision from the Homeowners Association, HOA. They want to seize a portion of my land to build a luxury resort. I had no say in this. They didn't notify us, didn't ask for permission. Just one letter said it all. On March 17, 2023, I stood in front of my house, reading the letter for the 3rd time. I still couldn't believe it. What were they planning to do? Take away 1.2 acres of land that my ancestors have worked hard to build and protect for nearly 80 years? My land, which is not just land, but part of our history. I couldn't let them do this. When I thought about what was at stake, I felt angry, not because of the value of the land, but because of the absurdity of their actions. The entire community, just for a resort, and they trample on the rights of a family that has been tied to this land for so many years. And me? I couldn't just stand by and watch them take what belonged to me. The feeling at that moment was indescribable. It was as if someone had just ripped away a part of my body. Can you imagine that? 3 generations, my ancestors poured so much effort into this place, and now, just because of one letter, they intended to erase everything. This loss wasn't just about land. It was about a piece of my soul and my family's soul. After receiving the HOA's letter, I couldn't sit still. This wasn't a small decision. It was something that would completely change the lives of my family and me. How could I let them invade the land that has been part of our family for 3 generations? Determined to find out why and confront Karen Smith, the president of the HOA, I stepped outside and went straight to her house. Karen lives in a luxurious villa, right near the community area. Her house is worth over $1.5 million, more than the combined value of my 3 houses. It was no surprise when I saw her open the door with a perfect smile, the smile of someone who has everything and never has to worry about anything. "Hello, David. Is there something I can help you with?" Karen said, her voice sweet, but with something insincere about it. She was wearing an expensive tracksuit, as if she had just come back from working out, though I had never seen her move a muscle in the time I'd lived here. "Karen, I need to know why the HOA decided to take a portion of my land," I replied, trying to stay calm even though anger was rising inside me. "This land isn't just land. It's my family's heritage. It's been ours for 3 generations. How can you make such decisions without discussing them with me?" Karen shrugged and flashed a charming smile. "Oh, David, I understand your frustration, but you don't need to worry. This plan is actually for the benefit of the whole community. We're developing a high-end resort on that land. You'll see, this resort will bring many benefits: a large swimming pool, a fancy cocktail bar, and a relaxation space for all the residents in the neighborhood." She glanced at her watch as if urging me to hurry up and listen to her. "So, I'm supposed to benefit from you taking my land to build a resort?" I asked again, looking her in the eye. It felt like a joke. Really, I couldn't understand how someone could say these things without feeling ashamed. Karen laughed, unfazed. "Yes, exactly. A modern resort will increase the land value around here significantly. And of course, you'll benefit from it too. Especially the pool area. It'll be very convenient for you, right? You'll have a great relaxing space right in your neighborhood." The luxurious pool Karen mentioned? We had done the math, and according to the HOA's maps, the area designated for the resort is 3.5 acres, of which more than 1 acre belongs to me. I'm sure I never received any notification about this plan. At that moment, I felt like I was listening to a speech from a marketing expert with no truth to it at all. Karen's words seemed like they were carefully prepared to soothe the residents. Easy to hear, but not convincing at all. I looked at her face and immediately noticed the lack of sincerity. "So, according to you, I'm supposed to just sit quietly and watch the HOA take my land while enjoying a few minor conveniences?" I replied. Karen tried to ease the tension. "David, don't misunderstand me. You'll still have the right to use this space as usual. Just think of it as an added benefit for you. The residents will all benefit from these new amenities. Things won't change much, just a few improvements." She also didn't forget to mention the development fees the HOA planned to charge residents to maintain the resort amenities. According to the HOA documents, every family in the neighborhood would have to pay an additional $800 per year to maintain the new amenities, excluding other service fees. All of this was packaged in a promise to improve the community. Just then, I spotted a new piece of paper on Karen's desk, a map with boundary lines I had never seen before. The straight lines cut through my beloved garden, through the very trees I had planted with my father. That's exactly what I needed. Evidence showing that the HOA had decided to infringe on my land without notifying me. After the tense meeting with Karen Smith, I couldn't sit still any longer. It was clear that everything was part of a deliberate arrangement, and I began to realize that I wasn't just fighting for land. I was fighting against a much larger conspiracy. But I needed specific evidence to confront the HOA and those behind them. And that's when I started paying attention to the construction at Jake and Laura Davis's house, the neighbors right next to me. On March 24th, as I was having breakfast, I looked out the window and saw a crew laying the foundation for a swimming pool right next to my land. This pool, approximately 80 feet long and 60 feet wide, was clearly being built so close to my property line that it could almost touch it. What was strange was that I hadn't received any official notification from the HOA about any changes to the property boundaries. There had been no meetings, no notices sent to me. Yet here was this large-scale project as if they already knew exactly how things would change. Immediately, I realized this wasn't a coincidence. The pool was being built in a rush, almost as if it had been started before the property lines were officially changed according to the HOA's plan. The distance from the pool to my land was only about 3 meters, and from the way it was being placed, I knew for sure that if my land was reclassified, they would have a pool right up against their property line. This wasn't just a random construction. This was a carefully planned move, as if they knew they would gain ownership of this land once the HOA changed the boundaries. According to the map the HOA had sent me, the resort development would occupy about 1.2 acres of my land, a significant amount. Meanwhile, Jake and Laura's pool took up about 0.1 acres, but was positioned right against my property line, just 3 meters away, leading me to suspect that all of this had been planned long before. This made me realize that not only was the HOA exploiting the system to seize my land, but there was a clear collaboration between the HOA and real estate developers. Jake and Laura weren't victims in this story. They were participants in a larger plan, part of manipulating community property, starting with the construction of this pool. So, after noticing this irregularity, I began reaching out to other neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual. Questions started forming in my mind. Were all of these actions part of a larger conspiracy to develop a resort and completely transform my neighborhood into a high-end tourist spot without anyone's consent? Seeing Jake and Laura building a pool right next to my land, I couldn't help but think of those Hollywood movies where the villains always start big projects right in front of everyone, while everyone stays silent. But this wasn't a movie, this was my life, and I wasn't about to sit back and watch them take the next step. It seemed like they had planned this all along, and I was just the one who showed up too late to realize it. Things became even more complicated when I realized I was up against a system that seemed to have been meticulously planned long ago. The covert actions of the HOA, combined with their collaboration with real estate developers, made me unable to shake off my suspicions about their true intentions. I had mentally prepared myself for this battle, but I knew I needed clear evidence to face them head-on. So, I turned back to the family documents, the maps my grandfather had carefully drawn many years ago. These maps, though yellowed with age, still held valuable information that I believed could change the game. I began rummaging through the old trunk my grandfather had left me, searching for anything that could prove that my land still belonged to the family. One evening, as the dim light illuminated the maps, I found a very important detail. On one of my grandfather's maps, there was a small note in the corner mentioning survey markers from 1952. This was a detail I had never noticed before, and it turned out to be the key to everything. The HOA's map only drew rigid straight lines, ignoring natural features like the stream, ancient trees, or rock outcrops that my grandfather had marked. But my grandfather's map was different. It followed the natural geographic landmarks, which, as I understood, still existed to this day. I compared my grandfather's maps with the new map the HOA had sent me, and I noticed a stark difference. An area of about 1 acre of my land, which the HOA claimed was common land, was completely missing from their map. This wasn't just a minor oversight. It was a serious error, possibly part of a plot to unlawfully seize my land. When I discovered this, I felt a sense of relief. At least I now had something in hand to prove that the HOA was trying to manipulate my land. But I knew that just having this wasn't enough. I needed the help of a real survey expert, someone who could verify the survey markers my grandfather had recorded back in 1952. After a few calls, I found Robert Lee, a survey expert my father had worked with before. Robert was meticulous and careful, and I knew he wouldn't miss any details. He had helped me with land-related work in the past, and now I needed his help once again. When I told Robert about my findings and the HOA's plans, he didn't hesitate to agree to help me. "David, I've worked on this land for a long time. If something's wrong, I'll find it right away. Don't worry, we'll go over all the survey markers and verify what your grandfather left behind." With Robert's help, we began looking for the survey markers my grandfather had noted. Robert's specialized surveying tools and our combined patience helped us discover something crucial. The 1952 survey markers were still intact, and they didn't just confirm the land boundaries. They indicated that the land the HOA was disputing actually belonged to me. This was irrefutable evidence. Can you imagine? A 1952 map turned out to be the thing that saved me from the HOA's manipulation. The people at the HOA might have modern machinery and advanced software, but perhaps they forgot one thing. Sometimes, all it takes is an old map drawn by my grandfather to expose their plot. Maybe I've grown older, but at least I can still beat them with the very family documents they underestimated. After discovering the 1952 survey markers and noticing the discrepancies in the HOA's map, I knew I had to do more than just gather evidence. On my own, with old documents and a few photos, I wasn't strong enough to confront Karen Smith and those behind her. I needed an ally. And the first person I thought of was Martha Williams, the elderly neighbor who lived at the end of the street. Martha had lived in this neighborhood for over 40 years, and she was one of the first people I met when my family moved here. Her house sat at the end of the road, surrounded by a beautiful garden that she tended to like a gardening expert. Every time I stopped by, she would be sitting on the porch in her old wooden chair, sipping tea and reading a book. She was an intellectual, always sharing interesting stories about the neighborhood's history, especially about the HOA, which she had little affection for. I walked up to her porch, knocked on the door, and stood there for a moment. Martha opened the door, smiling as she always did. She was a very approachable person, but her sharp gaze couldn't be hidden. "David, hello, what's going on?" she asked in a soft voice, but there was a hint of suspicion. "I need to talk to you about something, Martha. It's about the HOA and my family's land," I said, not hiding the worry in my voice. "I need your help." She invited me in, and we sat down at the dining table in her living room, surrounded by old paintings and books stacked on the shelves. "Tell me, what's got you so worried?" she asked as she poured me some tea. "How could I not be worried when my family's land is being threatened?" I began telling her about the HOA's plan to reclassify my land and the strange things I noticed in their map. "I suspect something isn't right, and I think you'll understand." Martha listened in silence, her eyes seeming to sharpen. "David, if you think this is the first time the HOA has done something like this, you're wrong. I've lived here long enough to know that they're not some benevolent organization. They've forced people to sell their land and leave." I felt a spark in my mind. "What? You're saying Karen and the HOA did this to other people in the neighborhood?" Martha nodded, placing her teacup on the table. "Yes, indeed. Remember the Hendersons' house? They lived right next to me and were forced to sell their land to the HOA, even though their land was worth much more than what the HOA offered. The reason they gave was that the HOA needed the land for a community development project. But the truth is, that land was turned into a resort development with real estate developers behind it." I was shocked. "So you didn't find anything odd about that?" Martha sighed softly, her smile fading. "Odd. Of course it was odd. I asked the Hendersons why they sold, but they just stayed quiet, afraid to say much. I'm sure Karen was involved in this. And don't forget, she has very close ties with the real estate developers. She's not doing this for the community, David. She's doing it for personal gain." Her words were like a cold splash of water to my face. This wasn't the first time the HOA had done this, and I was getting caught up in a conspiracy I didn't fully understand yet. But I knew I couldn't give up. If this had happened before, it could very well happen to me. "I want to know more," I continued, my voice resolute. "Can you tell me more about the previous cases? And are there any details you think could help me?" Martha looked at me for a moment, then sighed as if she were tired of what she knew. "David, I've known about this for a long time. The HOA members have special relationships with the developers, and they're always looking for ways to change land boundaries without informing anyone. They've even changed documents and maps in internal meetings without notifying the residents. Everything's handled in secret, like they're doing something good for the community, but in reality, they're just trying to grab more property." I listened to her every word, clearly sensing the frustration in Martha's voice. What she shared only made me more certain that Karen and the HOA were intentionally hiding these changes to serve their own interests. This was a big game, and I was the last to realize I was being played. "So what do I do now?" I asked, feeling confused. Martha looked at me deeply. "You need to expose everything. I can't do anything more because I'm too old, but you can. You need to find solid evidence to expose everything, not just what they're doing to you, but also to everyone else in this community." After the conversation with Martha, I felt like I had just heard a long, tragic story. But looking back, I couldn't help but smirk. When the people in the HOA thought they could deceive the residents who have lived here their whole lives, they forgot that people like Martha could see things more clearly than anyone else. In reality, I wasn't the only one being deceived, and these people didn't know that we were starting to figure out their game. I now had the support of people in the community and allies like Martha and Robert Lee. We all knew that if we wanted to win this fight, we needed to be thorough and gather enough evidence to expose the HOA's schemes. The next day, I met with Robert at his office. He was the only person I trusted to help me verify the old survey markers my grandfather had left behind. Robert was a surveyor, and he had helped my family with numerous projects in the past. When I told him about the 1952 survey markers I had discovered, he was eager to get involved. "David, I know the area you're talking about. I surveyed this land back in the 90s, and I remember there were plenty of old survey markers around here. But the important thing is, we need to find the remaining markers and verify that they match what your grandfather recorded, Robert said in a calm, yet confident tone. For an entire week, we scoured every inch of land, looking for the old survey markers that my grandfather had marked. With the help of modern surveying tools, we finally found one of the remaining markers, a small stone marker next to an ancient tree that my grandfather had drawn on the map. This confirmed that the area of my land was actually larger than what the HOA had marked. But there was something even more important. We discovered a significant area within my land where my grandfather had left notes about historical artifacts. David, I think we're finding something bigger, Robert said after checking some archaeological records. If what I found is correct, this area might have been the site of an ancient civilization. I'll need an archaeologist to verify this. But if it's true, this is an important archaeological site and could be protected under historical preservation laws. That was a turning point. If we could verify that my land contained historical artifacts, we would have a powerful weapon to fight the HOA. Karen and the HOA's resort project would have to be stopped immediately if we could prove this was an area that needed preservation under the law. I knew this was my only chance to protect my land. I decided to contact an archaeologist, someone I knew through an old friend. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a local archaeology expert, agreed to come and inspect my land. After conducting a thorough survey, she confirmed that the site I had discovered was likely to contain ancient artifacts, including stone tools and pottery fragments. She said, "If these findings are verified, your land will fall under preservation laws, and no construction projects can take place in this area." We had gathered enough evidence and submitted a request for historic preservation review to the relevant authorities. This not only protected my land, but also dealt a significant blow to the HOA's plan. But I knew the HOA wouldn't easily give up on their goal. And as I predicted, when Karen and the HOA members realized that I was preparing to take action, they began working even more covertly. A week after I submitted the preservation request, I received a secret call from a friend in the community. "David, you need to be careful. I just heard from a friend of mine in the HOA. They're trying to change the maps again and will keep attempting to take your land without notifying anyone." The voice of my friend sounded worried, and I knew the situation was getting even more serious. With this information, I decided not to sit back. My team and I began collecting more evidence of the HOA's secret meetings and looked into whether they were carrying out any shady actions. I started contacting residents in the neighborhood to ask if they had heard anything about the changes to the land boundaries, and I also looked into Karen's relationships with real estate developers. Soon after, I discovered something crucial. One of the HOA members, Frank Thompson, had close ties with the real estate company Karen was collaborating with. This company planned to develop a resort right on my land, and Frank Thompson was the one pushing this plan in the HOA's internal meetings. I have to admit, what I uncovered during these days was not only frightening, but also a bit ridiculous. Did they really think they could hide everything without anyone noticing? The people in this HOA clearly didn't understand that, no matter how much they lied, eventually, the truth would come out. After a week of intense preparation, I finally received a notification from the HOA about an emergency meeting they were holding. This meeting would decide on the land boundary changes in the community, and it could potentially affect my land directly. I knew this was a pivotal moment. If I didn't act now, everything I had worked for would be in vain. The meeting was scheduled for April 15th, 2025, and from what I had heard from a few friends in the neighborhood, Karen Smith had planned to push through the land boundary changes quickly and without opposition. She was confident that everything was arranged and that it would only take a few votes to win. But I knew this time, she wouldn't win so easily. I had prepared meticulously. Robert Lee and I had thoroughly reviewed all the survey documents, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. The archaeological evidence had been confirmed and sent out, and I had also prepared legal documents to prove that my land was legally owned and could not be altered or seized. I had also reached out to other residents in the neighborhood who might support me in this struggle. Everything had been carefully arranged. On the day of the meeting, I walked into the HOA meeting room, where over 50 residents had gathered, including HOA board members, with Karen and her allies present. The atmosphere was tense as soon as I stepped into the room. All eyes were on me, and I could feel the discontent from those who realized that this meeting wouldn't be like the others. Karen stood up, a smug look on her face. She scanned the room and began introducing the plan to change the land boundaries. "We've been discussing improving the infrastructure in this area for a while," Karen began. "The land reclassification will help develop the community and bring benefits to all of us. We've gathered all the necessary information, and now it's time for us to make a decision." I didn't let her speak any longer. I stood up, holding a thick stack of documents, and began to speak. "Sorry, Karen, but I can't let you continue without addressing the truth," I said, my voice firm. "What you're saying is false, and I have evidence to prove it." The room fell silent, everyone listening intently. I presented the HOA's map and compared it to the survey map I had found, pointing out the discrepancies in the boundaries the HOA had drawn. "As you can see," I continued, "this is the HOA's map. And here's my grandfather's map. It's much clearer and more accurate. The boundaries that the HOA has proposed are not only wrong, but also unlawfully take a significant portion of my legal land." I clarified every point, showing that the land division proposed by the HOA was completely unreasonable. "And not only that, do you see this?" I continued, holding up the archaeological evidence I had gathered, proving that my land contained historical artifacts. "These are pottery fragments and stone tools that we found on my land. According to the law, this land cannot be developed if it contains historical artifacts. This means that the HOA's construction plans cannot proceed without approval from historical preservation authorities." Karen tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her stop me. I continued presenting the evidence I had prepared. "And here's something very important you should know. I've also discovered that Karen Smith and some members of the HOA have ties to real estate developers who would directly benefit from seizing my land to build a resort. This is a clear conflict of interest, and I filed a complaint with the relevant authorities about this." The room erupted in noise, with neighbors whispering and exchanging opinions. The people I had talked to and convinced earlier began standing up and criticizing the HOA's actions. The voices of opposition grew louder. Karen lost her composure. She stood up, hurriedly saying, "These are just accusations. We've done everything for the benefit of the community. There's no way we would do this for personal gain." But I had prepared a decisive piece of evidence. "If you want to know the truth, look at these emails," I said, and immediately presented the emails I had collected, showing that members of the HOA had discussed plans to collaborate with real estate developers to transfer land without informing the community. The atmosphere in the room became tense. HOA members started looking nervous, and the residents who had stood by me began supporting me even more strongly. Finally, I turned to Karen and said, "With all this evidence, I believe you all will agree that changing these land boundaries is unacceptable." After a tense vote, the final result was clear: the HOA had failed. The board members and most of the residents voted against the land boundary change. Karen and her allies lost, and their resort development plan was canceled. Immediately after the meeting, I received a call from one of the HOA board members. Their voice sounded anxious, and I knew something important was happening. "David," they said, "Karen and the board have met after the vote. They've decided to concede and will withdraw the request to seize your land." At that moment, I felt a new breath of relief in my chest. Not because I had won the battle, but because I knew that all my efforts, along with the support of the residents in the neighborhood, had helped protect both my rights and the community's. But what was even more notable were the conditions I had set to ensure that the HOA wouldn't repeat these actions in the future. First, I demanded a public apology from Karen and the HOA members for the way they had treated my family and the residents. This wasn't just a typical apology. I wanted them to take responsibility for their actions and admit that they were wrong for not informing the community about such important changes. Second, I demanded improvements in the neighborhood's noise regulations. The loud parties from residents like Jake and Laura had kept me awake many nights. Of course, the neighborhood needed recreational spaces, but the noise couldn't infringe on the rights of others. This was especially important for older residents like Martha, who needed a quiet space to live. Finally, I required the HOA to create a fund to assist with boundary verification for every family in the community. This was crucial to avoid unnecessary land disputes in the future. This way, residents could be confident that their rights wouldn't be violated without their knowledge. After my proposal was accepted, I couldn't help but feel proud of what we had achieved. Not only had I protected my land, but I had also helped safeguard the rights of the entire community. But the story didn't end there. With this change, I was invited to attend a meeting with the entire HOA and the residents of the neighborhood. And then, something unexpected happened. I was appointed to the Architectural Council. I never thought I would receive such great trust. In fact, I was quite stunned when I was informed of this decision. However, I quickly realized that this was an opportunity for me to continue defending the community's interests, not just for my family, but for my neighbors as well. Being part of the Architectural Council meant that I could participate in deciding development projects in the neighborhood, ensuring that all decisions were transparent and fair. Being selected for the Architectural Council felt like I had become a guardian of my community. The decisions I made would not only affect my family's land, but also impact all the residents in this neighborhood. This was a huge responsibility, but I was ready to embrace it. Joining the council wasn't just an opportunity to correct past mistakes, but also to ensure that all residents in the neighborhood were treated fairly and had a voice in shaping the future of the community. In the end, after relentless effort, David achieved a great victory. Not only had he protected his family's land, but he had also forced the HOA to change the way they treated the residents of the community. With solid historical and legal evidence, David not only revealed the truth, but also set reasonable demands to protect the rights of everyone. The public apology, improved noise regulations, and the creation of a fund to assist with boundary verification for the community were the conditions David set to ensure that past mistakes would not be repeated. And the result couldn't have been clearer. David not only reclaimed his land ownership, but was also invited to join the Architectural Council, becoming a protector of his community's interests. But the story doesn't end here. It opens up an important lesson about property rights, fairness, and the responsibilities of powerful organizations. Can we trust organizations like the HOA? And do we truly know what's happening in our own communities? The question is, if you were in David's shoes, what would you do? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and share your opinions on this story. If you found this story interesting and want to follow more captivating content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next stories.